Okay, so I just wanted to show you a couple of things having to do with our armatures here. So the armatures you're going to be receiving for this project will look like this. We're not going to make the armatures in this class. However, I did want to kind of just discuss the process of how you would make an armature. So this armature is composed out of two different wires that are the main kind of green armature that kind of creates the body. And what you'll see here, let me try and get this in camera, is there's a wire that comes up here to the shoulder, and then it comes down into the rib cage, crosses over, goes up, goes over to the other shoulder, and down this side. That way, when I bend this arm, it does not affect the other arm. So it's integrated into the main armature, the rib cage. So basically, there's one, as I said, piece that is the central body, which is this here. And then there is another piece that would be the arms. You'll notice that the armatures have been wrapped with wire. So if I pull this up closer, you can kind of take a look. Wire's been wrapped around it because this armature wire that I'm using is actually made by Hooks. You can buy it at Home Depot and Lowe's. This is probably, I don't know, I'd say maybe like $10, but there is a lot of wire here. It's what, 30 meters or 100 feet. Aluminum armature wire for figures is really quite expensive if you buy it from an art store or something. So this goes a long ways. It's very malleable. Seems to last a long time. And having that kind of, there's actually a plastic coating over this. It makes it kind of easier to tie the wire together with more wire because it kind of digs into the plastic. Anyways, I just wanted to kind of show you a little bit of this process so that you understand how armatures are made. Normally, when you're making an armature, you would want to start off with drawing a contour drawing of your figure in probably like frontal view and then from the side to help you figure out how big the skeleton will be, how big your armature should be, because you have to remember you're going to be adding clay on top of this, and you don't want your armature protruding from your body. Anyways, I'm just going to kind of show you how to bend the armature, because you can see these are fairly neat. They're not perfect, but they do their job. So for bending armature wire, what I like to do is, first you kind of straighten the armature out as much as possible, and you use the pliers to hold it. So I'm kind of grabbing it with a pair of pliers and then bending it. Okay, so it just helps you get a cleaner bend, and it's not a perfect system. You probably can't see because my elbow's in the way, but I'm going to grab it just above this shoulder right here, and I'm going to hold it down and then use the plier to bend the armature. Try to do this without a pair of pliers. Your radiuses on your bends would be like really round, so this gives you a nice clean sharp bend, so you can kind of get the idea of the process here. I'm not going to do this whole armature because it would take a lot of time. So I'm kind of doing this quickly just so you can kind of understand the process. And again, I used to, when we're in class face to face, I used to make everybody make their own armatures, but it's a little tedious, and it oftentimes requires some hands-on help if you've never done it before. Um, and so we just pre-made the armatures for everybody since we're working remote. So you just want to really make sure that, like the shoulders are not too broad. And again, this is kind of, this is a starting point. This armature, when you receive them, is going to need to get adjusted to put it in the right place for your figure. So, don't rely on all of the bends and everything. You might need to make some adjustments. So, okay, so there you can see I very quickly kind of bent the shoulder piece, so this will get integrated into the figure here. Now, it's tricky to do this all in one step, so I don't know if you can hold this up so you can see. You'll notice if you look at this closely, there's some duct tape there. I think you ought to be able to see that duct tape. So I kind of taped it here and I taped it here, right? And I also put duct tape here and down here to hold this together while I'm wrapping it. And also what I do is I cinch, it's called cinching, where you take a thicker gauge piece of wire and you create like a little V. You wrap the wire around and you twist it, and it digs into the wire and holds it together. That's how they kind of tie fences together, and it works quite well. So on most of these, there's a cinch here, and there's a cinch on either side. So it's like a heavier gauge wire that's been twisted to the point that is digging into the plastic around it. And then when the whole thing gets wrapped, that also holds it together. So that's the basics of armatures. Okay, so once you have kind of bent your armature and kind of captured, I would recommend looking at the femur from the lateral view and trying to bend a little bit of an arc into it. Make sure that your axis of your femur is kind of, at like a 6-degree kind of coming into the knee. You will be able to adjust this, but I would try to, get rid of the wiggles and bumps in your armature, kind of lock down the proportions, try to bend it into the gesture of the skeleton, make sure that your feet are kind of positioned underneath the skull so that the figure is balanced. Your lower leg, the tibia and fibula, should be kind of like parallel, straight, and then, they should flare out for the femur. And you're going to want to kind of try to get that S curve of the spine in your armature, and so on and so forth. You can adjust things, it's not, you're not totally locked in, but you really want to take care of as much of that as possible. So the next kind of step in the process is going to be to mass out what will be a skull, okay? To mass out a whole volume that is going to represent the full rib cage, and then to mass out a volume that will stand in for the pelvic bone. And then, of course, I'm going to ask you to kind of take little balls of clay and kind of mark your shoulder, elbow, wrist on both sides, the hip, the knee, and the ankle. So with those points and those volumes, we're going to be able to establish a proportion system that works with your figure, okay? So it will help if you have a ruler. My figure is 17.5 inches tall, okay? So the center of the body is going to be the pubic symphysis here, this like tiny little cartilaginous feature in the pelvic bone. So if I kind of divided it in half and found the center point, you know, I would be at, 8 3/4 of an inch or so for this mark. So I just took a little piece of clay and kind of took my ruler and measured to 8 3/4. It's a little bit down from there. Just to help me kind of plot things out, okay? So one thing that it's not required, but it may help. You know, rather than your rib cage being solid, you could take a little bit of tinfoil. Just don't. If you do this, don't overdo it. It will. It'll save a little bit of clay, and it might make kind of laying the material on there a little easier. So, you know, the thing is like with this clay, this is gonna be, you know, it's a funny process. It kind of is time consuming. It's a slow process. You're gonna want to be careful that you don't any wire that's kind of sticking out. You're gonna want to make sure that's bent out of the way. These armatures have been kind of like bent and stuff, so some of you might have to kind of compress the rib cage a little bit. But let's start off with kind of massing out the rib cage. You can, if you have a butter knife or something, you can kind of use that to help you cut through the material. Sorry about that squeak. That's on my list to do. Little WD-40. Yeah, so you're gonna mass out the rib cage. You're also gonna be kind of massing out the skull. Okay, so in the PowerPoint, there's I will highlight it, and I'm gonna record a little lecture to kind of walk you through the process and kind of show you some reference images. There's a PowerPoint in the content module on Beachboard that that has a lot of references for this project. You're going to want to look through that and kind of use some of those references to help guide you through the process. So you know, this is crude. I'm just kind of trying to mass out the volumes of these three kind of major skeletal structures, and you know, adding the clay on it just takes some time. So you're going to want to you can look at the references. I'll show them to you in the presentation. They are very symmetrical and very geometric, and they're not just abstractions. They're they're actually approximating the features on the sort of a very planar version of these kind of various skeletal features. So so you take your time doing this. You want to pack the clay onto your form really well. You don't want to have like air pockets in there. So it's a slow process. Just keep you know, cutting small pieces. If you want, you can kind of work in little kind of cubes, or if you are more comfortable kind of just like tearing pieces off and kind of softening it with your hands, that is fine too. So remember the armature here, where it's coming out, this is going to become the head of the femur, okay? So your pelvic bone is gonna be much higher than that, okay? So, and the pelvis is one of the most difficult kind of forms to understand and to sculpt. And it's so important for establishing proportions, because if it's too high, the legs will be too long. If it's too low, the torso is too long. So at first, you know, I'm not, I don't really care how you get the material on there. You just need to make sure what makes it strong is that it's all kind of compacted together and also attached to the armature. Like if it's just hanging off of the piece, it's gonna fall apart. So the best way to work this material is to add on to it and then carve away, and then add more. So this figure from both the lateral view from the side and the interior from the front, and go back and forth and really look at the fullness of these forms as a whole form, right? So don't worry about ribs, don't worry about individual ribs. I don't care about that kind of stuff. And if you start modeling that stuff too soon, it's just gonna be wasted, because if you if you don't establish the correct volume, then you're gonna have to rework all of that detail. So okay, so we're gonna be trying to kind of do this very, very quickly, just to kind of give you an idea of the process of applying it. All right, so you're going to need to start blocking in the forms. And what I want you to do is, in the PowerPoint, there is a couple of references of some Ecorches that are blocked out. So you're going to need to kind of block out the skull, the rib cage, and the pelvic bone. And then I also want you to bend the armature, straighten everything out, try to get the axis, that 6-degree kind of axis of the femur, plot out where your patella would be, which is not the end of the femur, but it's like where the knee is, right? So it's actually a little bit higher than where the femur terminates. And then your ankle, and just a lot of people kind of really flatten feet out. So really look at the bones, the calcaneus bone in the foot, and look at how the tibia and fibula kind of basically sit on top of these, bones of the foot. So your ankle shouldn't be like way down there. It should be up a little bit. Try to, again, this is your assignment for Thursday, right? I want you to bend your armature, get it standing, kind of look, oops, I gotta get that WD-40. Get it kind of so that it's balanced. These feet are not fixed down, so you're gonna probably, sometimes what we have to do is kind of overcorrect them and get them to land where you want them to do. You can you can also bend your like this foot is not touching, so what I could do is I could take this and kind of bend it so it's a little bit lower, right? And by doing that, it will create tension with the board, and it won't want to rock. So yeah, so just look at the digital model of the skeleton, and simplify the volume of the skull into kind of like a planar structure, right? So don't start kind of modeling ribs or anything, but you're gonna want to like look at this, the top rib of number 1, and look how it comes around and attaches in the back, and this establishes an angle. It's not like this, it's at an angle, and the ribs are pretty much going to be in that angle, that same angle that you determine up here, which is kind of defined by the contour of that top rib and the way that it runs into the manubrium, which is part of the sternal body. And you know, you could see I'm kind of faintly kind of mapping out the costal cartilage of the rib cage, because there's a shift in plane there. So try to make it symmetrical. You know, oh, sorry, it's kind of hard to draw it backhanded. You know, find your center points, and you know, maintain those kind of center lines. Make everything symmetrical, really smooth. Try to try to kind of get it massed out in terms of the volumes that are there. Be accurate to the skeleton, and you know, the rib cage is a very complicated structure. You know, it's gonna take some observation to really kind of figure out how to get it correct. You can see here that the rib cage is up higher than where the arms are, and then it comes down to where the arms are. You know, your head, like you're going to establish a scale for the head, right? So one head would put you right here. This third head will put you basically at the top of the pelvic bone. The fourth head would be at the bottom of the pelvic bone. The fifth head is going to put you kind of right here on the femur, and so the knee will kind of be in between the fifth and the sixth head. And then you've got 7 and then 7.5. Do a 7.5 head figure. I highly recommend that you look at there's one reference I'll point out in the PowerPoint to you that is very helpful. It's just a contour line drawing that might be helpful for you to lay things out. But you know, you can see the axis of my arms, they're not straight. They're kind of going, the shoulders are kind of forward, they're going back. The elbows kind of lining up with the bottom of the rib cage. You know, the hip is kind of indicating where your wrist would be. But I want you to kind of, you know, use some of these references, but also look at the skeleton. And for Thursday, I just want you to block everything in and make sure that we've kind of established a scale that's correct, that that kind of captures the form.